The really, really good news and the new Anchorman. The subheading for this might be the really, really good news that most everybody doesn't believe, and the new Anchorman who most everyone is not really anchored into. Recently, I've been provoked in my spirit by a number of things that have happened during the time of this COVID-19 pandemic. And I, like others, used to watch the news. And I say I used to watch it because I've stopped watching a lot of it. Quite honestly, I really don't know what to believe or who to believe in terms of what is actually going on. I'm told unequivocally by all news outlets and media that they are telling the truth and that their competitors are definitely not. Not that they say it outwardly quite as strong as that, but that's what they mean really. So there's a lot of mixed messages there. What is false? What is true? Who knows? Of course, in the midst of all that, we, and by that I mean Christians generally, because that'd be my audience, although I hope that this gets a tremendously big audience of many, many different people from all over the world. But mostly I'm talking to a Christian audience, and we have the Bible, which is the Word of God, which is held aloft as the go-to for millions of Christians. A sure and certain word in times of trouble, and it certainly is that. Or it should be that. But it all depends on the way that you interpret what you read and the lens by which you see the pages of the book. So that's really what I wanted to talk about during these next minutes, shall we say, maybe an hour or two. The truth is, the way that you hear, see, and understand the message of the pages of the Bible determines your past, your present, and your future. And I believe that its message has become unclear, compromised, and confused. In many ways, understanding the truth of its pages and any news and reports God might be sending us is like sitting between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, or the Democrats and the Republicans, or Fox News and CNN, or BBC and ITV. You get the picture. And most people are trying to decipher what the news really is. And in terms of the Bible and Christians and things about God, much of it is about a God who we say loves us all. And yet, at the same time, he also seems to be crushing us, killing us, slowly getting rid of us, because in the end, he's still angry with us, he's upset, and he deals with our sin by sending all sorts of accidents, problems, various things that hit the earth. And really, that's how a lot of people see him. But we've got to begin to ask ourselves, is that really God? Is that the God who you believe in? So, we need to look at the good news again. Let's face it, over the years, whenever a disaster strikes, whenever there's a tsunami, a devastating earthquake, a plague, unusual phenomenon, whatever takes place, wherever thousands and millions of people die, I believe the insurance companies call it an act of God, but wherever people die of famine or poverty, and those kind of things, there are those who are religious amongst us who often have thoughts of an angry God dealing with a corrupt and darkened world. And this, of course, is not surprising as the Old Testament is filled with what appears to be a God who is not only angry, but tremendously bloodthirsty. I mean, I could read from any number of passages in the Old Testament. Let's just take Psalm 68. I mean, this is one that we like. It's a rousing psalm. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered. Let them also that hate him flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melteth before the fire, so let the wicked perish at the presence of God. Well, okay, if we've had an hard day and we're feeling a bit provoked, and when we pray we get a bit enthused and heated, we may well speak these verses. But let's just think for a moment. Let God arise. Okay, yeah, I understand. The writer was writing thousands of years ago and was pressed by opposing armies and wanted victory, otherwise he was dead. So of course he wants God to arise. Let his enemies be scattered. Well, yeah, if my God is my God and nobody else is God, then of course my enemies are his enemies, and therefore he must want them scattered as well, defeated and without the ability to gather together against me. So let his enemies be scattered, because his enemies are my enemies, and we both have enemies together and we just want them scattered. Let those who hate him flee before him. Yes, if they hate him, they won't want to be close to him anyways, will they? And then it says we want them driven away. We want to see them melted like wax. And we want to see them perish. And of course, all of that is understandable thousands of years ago. I get it. In the place they lived, the knowledge that they had, and the insight that they'd received about God, and the revelation that they'd received about God, I understand that in the light of that knowledge which they had then. I understand it. But now, I don't understand it. I understand the terminology, and I understand that we might get enthused about it and we might say these things, but actually, is this really how God is? Is he really like this? Well, listen. The news has changed. The time has changed. The understanding of who God really is has changed. It's not the time of Moses, not the time of the law anymore, and I'll talk about that more. It's a new day, and it's a new age, and a new Anchorman, whose name is Jesus, is reporting some new news. He brought some new good news. I mean, just think about this. He delivered it personally. And it means so much to him that we receive it. He fulfilled the old news and signed the good news into a new law. And that law was the law of the Spirit of life and liberty and the Spirit of love. And in that law, in the law of love, every other law is fulfilled. And then he shared this good news with the whole of God with the whole of mankind on behalf of God, who he also put a face to. He put a face to God. And he put a name to God. And he made God known throughout the earth. That is what the good news is all about. You see, people hear a psalm like the one above, and everything becomes me and God against everyone else, who, according to that, is my enemy. Well, that's not true though, is it? Not really. We can't really say that anymore. And of course, there are those who are not religious who think, just as I presumed, God is not a God of love at all. Because when we say these things, we are double-minded about what we're actually saying about God without knowing that we're being double-minded. But we are double-minded, and people hear it. There are others that just blame God, and then there's others who continue on not even acknowledging that there is a God. We have all these people, don't we? Different people with different thoughts. Interestingly, though, it's a known fact that when these times happen, when things like this happen, like a pandemic or a tsunami, and an individual is involved, or numbers of individuals and people are involved everywhere, some of the first thing that they do is call out to an unknown God. They begin to pray, even though they say they don't believe, even though some of them would say that they're atheists. When people find themselves in times of trouble, they begin to pray to an unknown God. If there is a God, help me. I need help now. Those are the kind of prayers that people pray in these situations. No doubt thousands and millions of people have been praying those kinds of prayers during the last 2 months. Many on going through devastating trauma are more than happy for prayers to be said and the ministry of some spiritual sort to be given. That's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And the reason for this is due to what it says in Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 10. It says that eternity is already found in the heart. Eternity is already within every person. There is this sense of there is something more. There's someone more. And of course, not everyone would say that's God, but it's been put into the heart of men and women and boys and girls, because God put that there. So it's no different now. People are beginning to seek God. They're beginning to search for Him. The question is, though, what kind of message do we actually have for them? And what do they really believe about Him? And what is the message of life that we are bringing? Just as the angel said to the disciples in Acts 4 and 5, I think it's chapter 5 actually, when they've been put in prison, they've been locked down, and the angel comes along and says, off you goes, boys. He opens the doors to the prison. He says, off you go, boys. Go to the temple, take your place, and begin to talk about the message of life that God has given you. And that's exactly what they do. And as the angel leaves, he closed the door behind him. The prison guards are still stood there like some lemons, not even knowing that everybody's just walked out of the lockdown. And there they are, sharing life again. But what is the message of life? And of course, there is this normal life that whatever normal life is, but there is this life that we share together, every one of us. It's common to all of us. It's life. And we must begin to value life. But then, of course, there's the overflowing life that we have received as those who are loved of God. We've received a new life, and we have a new dynamic and creative life within us. So we are meant to be sharing this life that we have with everyone and exemplifying it. And let's pray that as we come through this, we've understood the value of life. We've understood what we actually are here for and why we're here, and the wonderful things that God has given us, and that we actually value those things. So, of course, there's been an increase in prayer during this time, and in some recent surveys it seems to say that numbers of people have been praying, and not only praying but also looking on the internet and getting involved in some of the stuff that's going on social media, and there's thousands and millions of people doing this, which is wonderful. I understood that in Italy recently was one of the guys here who works with the Billy Graham Association said that there were thousands and thousands of Italian people who were ringing to find out about Jesus. That is wonderful news, absolutely wonderful news. So there's lots of things going on, but can I just tell you this one story? And this is what happened probably 5 weeks ago. I met someone, and we were talking about the pandemic, of course, socially distanced. We were talking about the pandemic, and this person said, to the effect of, well, of course, Italy has been hit so hard because God is upset that it's a nation of Catholics who oppose him. Now, of course, we might all go, what a thing to say. But really, we need to begin to think about what we are saying. We need to be thinking about what the message is that we are speaking about God and about this life. We need to be very watchful about the words that are coming out of our mouth, because that picture of God is not a good picture of God. That's a picture of an angry God who really doesn't like certain things that people do, and it appears that he doesn't like people either, because they are dying and he's quite happy to allow that to happen. But I want to tell you, that's not the God that I believe in. And I don't believe that that is the God that Jesus came to give us as an example and to show us. And I'm going to make that clear as we go on. I do remember these as well. So, New Orleans getting hit with Hurricane Katrina, well, that was God dealing with homosexuality. When the Twin Towers were hit, that was God dealing with corruption at the highest place in New York, with the financial people at New York. Now, listen to me. This is not what I'm saying. These are things that I have heard over many years. But I'm telling you now, I don't believe that's anything to do with God at all. And of course, sadly, I heard this as well not so long ago. Someone was preaching, and they said that China was Gog and Russia was Magog, or the other way around. And they were going through it, and in one sentence preached that China and Russia would be hit with nukes, and that is how God would take care of those people. Now, I want to say that if you have ever heard those kind of messages, and you are a person that's now tuned into this message, I want to first of all ask forgiveness for saying such things as that. Not that I have said those things, and I would never say those things, but I want to ask forgiveness on behalf of people who would say that they are Christians who have said those things. Because I don't believe that God is like that at all. I don't believe that God would simply punish someone in such a way for their sin or for their ideology or for the way that they see the world or for whatever reason. I don't believe that God would ever just eradicate people in such a way. Sadly, though, it seems that classic theology would say that even the things that are happening now, it would be God dealing with the world. But anyway, it's about time, and this is what I began to think, it's about time that we reported the news right. shouldn't we bring the news report right up to date? You see, because many people may well turn to the Lord. Many people may come to know Jesus, and that is what we are praying. But we don't just pray it during a time like this. We're praying it all the time, that people will come to know Jesus and that they will come and know God in a whole new and beautiful way. Of course, whatever you think, everyone has the life and the breath and the movement in God. It's an impossibility not to. It'd be like telling a fish, it'd be like saying to a fish that there's no water in the jar, but he's surrounded by water. Well, everyone's surrounded by the water of life. Every one of us, whether we believe or we don't believe. God gives us life, gives us breath, gives us movement, all of us. It just happens that some people have plugged in a little bit more than others, and we'll talk about that later. But can we just say this as well? In many other nations, COVID-19 has just been another additional plague. It's been another dreadful devastation, another traumatic event to add to the very many which they already suffered and which they already go through. I don't think that we've ever shut down the globe, the whole globe, on a scale like this before. But that's probably because suddenly it began to touch in on our Western, comfortable, luxurious life. As well as a plan by the enemy, of course, there is one, and it's already defeated. Jesus has already sorted this out as well, but he still makes loads of trouble. And some of us have listened to his lies and his deceiving. But really, since we're incredibly selfish, and please understand my heart, I'm talking to myself as well. But we are incredibly selfish and live in a bubble of comfort and blessing. And when such a virus hits, like it has just hit, we deem it right and good to protect ourselves and lock everything down and hide away from it until it's passed. Anything to protect ourselves. And I'm not saying, please understand me, I'm not saying that it's wrong. But I do question that our motives are as pure as we tell ourselves. And when I have the distinct sense that God asks me, what side of the road will you walk on, Paul? The right side or the other side? When he asks me questions like that, I must begin to think about what I'm actually doing and why I'm actually doing it. Anyway, there's no doubt there's more seeking and searching God out. This is what's happening right now. And no doubt God is working, as always, in wonderful ways that we don't really know or see. He's speaking and moving in ways which we don't always discern. There's wonderful things going on in the midst of all of this. And there's people ministering in many different ways. And people are healed and people are recovering. And of course, it is a terrible thing that so many people have died from this devastating plague. But since we are changed and then live according to the knowledge we have, we must ask ourselves seriously, what kind of salvation and transformation we are expecting? Especially given our half-cooked theology that is neither new nor old, but somewhere in between. Because my sense is that many people may well turn to God. Many people may well seek out and search out after God. But of course, it's according to the knowledge that we have And that knowledge, we can grow to the diameter, we can grow to the width, we can grow to the depth, we can grow to the height of that knowledge. But if that knowledge is this big, then actually those people who do come to know God are not going to be much different to us. And we seem to be caught somewhere between the new and the old. What do we really believe about God in the midst of all of this? Is he the one that orchestrated this? Is this his wrath or his anger on the earth? Is he really so mad with us that he's wiping us out? And if he is so mad with us that he's wiping us out, why are also people recovering and getting healed? Is he going to send other plagues? Is there going to be other destruction so that he can get our attention? Does he see us as little ants and occasionally just enjoy wiping us all out? Judging by some comments and prophetic utterances from various Christian leaders and believers around the world, it would seem that God really does have it in for us. He's had enough of our sin, and he's going to make short work of us and deal with us powerfully. Judging by what others seem to say, he's full of love toward us, and everything's okay, and we're all doing well. If we just do enough good works and sing some nice songs and put the coffee on, it'll all go away, and we'll carry on in our cosy Christian existence after this when it's all over. Whew, my Lord. Again, though, what do we really believe and think about God, especially in the midst of these kind of times? Because until you've answered this question for yourself, your mental health is at stake. Because let's face it, the only time we, and the world in general, ever get around to thinking about spiritual realities is at the odd royal wedding, or a funeral of a family member, or someone close, or a special occasion where God may be mentioned. Those are about the only times that the world actually stops. Christmas, of course, but even Christmas, we've begun to forget who's the centre of Christmas. And Easter, well, that's all about bunnies now. But there's a few times that we begin to listen again, but it's for short periods of time. And what I've realised during this time is that there's been a tremendous amount of persistent prayer. I believe, you see, because we're a resolute people, the English people are resolute people, and we will pray. We'll dig in and we'll pray. We'll persist in prayers. And some of the prayers are just us knocking on the door and going, oh God, hear our prayer. We need you to do something, please God. You know, a bit like the widow that was knocking on the door that Jesus told the parable about. And eventually the judge came to the window and he said, okay, I've had enough now. I've had enough of your noise. It's granted. Okay, at the end of that parable, so he said persistent prayer, that's fine. And God hears our prayers, every cry, every tear, everything. He hears it all. But Jesus said at the end of that parable, he said, but will there be faith on the earth when the Son of Man comes? And that's a completely different thing. Prayers that are powered by faith is a completely different thing to just prayers. But thank God for prayers. But let's pray that the faith that God's given us might rise up and come to us in a new power, a new release. But quite honestly, there's very little faith, real faith. There's fear, there's terror, there's anxiousness, but I'm not sure that there's faith. It's interesting that James talked thousands of years ago. James, one of the disciples of Jesus who wrote a book, talked 2,000 years ago about being double-minded. That where there's a double mind, it's nearly impossible to move in faith, because the negative part of the mind steals away the faith-empowered prayer. And it's a fight that goes on. So, of course, when you've got a double mind, it's very difficult to take aim and to really hit the target. Of course, James said, if you're double-minded, you won't get what you're asking for. And that is because God's not double-minded. Shall we just say that again? God's not double-minded. God is good. Really, really good. So let's think about God again. What do we really believe? Well, it's obvious that nearly everyone believes that God is like they are. He has his good days, he had his bad days. Sometimes he's happy, sometimes he's angry. When we think about Bible stories or things we've heard, he seems pretty harsh, especially in history when he's dealing with Israel and the surrounding nations. He's powerful, he's considerably angry in dealing with all the things that are going on. But let's really look at what we really believe.